Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove, and once again I am not joined by Taylor Rockwell, but I will be tomorrow, I promise. Today's guest is Matt Hermann. Matt, you should know from Talking Fussball. Talking Fussball is a Bundesliga podcast in the English language. I believe it is the best one out there. If there's a better one, I don't know about it. That's because Matt and his co-hosts are serious Bundesliga watchers. Matt himself lives in Berlin. He has that sort of first-hand knowledge, first-hand experience of covering the Bundesliga for Deutsche Welle and other outlets. But his outlet today is the Total Soccer Show. We're going to be talking about... We're kind of at the midpoint of the Bundesliga in terms of the first half of the season is over. The winter break has happened because it gets real cold in Germany in the winter. Most people will know that. And the Bundesliga is about to kick off again this weekend. It's actually back on Friday afternoon US Eastern Time with Bayer Leverkusen versus Bayern Munich. We're going to look back at that first half of the season. How are Bayern top despite having to fire their coach, Carlo Ancelotti, early in the season? How's Christian Pulisic doing? What's going on with that, not even rumour, but news that Dominic Tedesco is thinking about moving Weston McKennie from central midfield to centre-back? Maybe not full-time, but at least converting him so he can play that second position at Schalke. I'll get Matt's take on all that and more. Before the interview, here's a quick update on the live show I've been talking about. It is pretty much 100% happening now. It's going to be next Thursday, that's January 18th. It's going to be 7 p.m. and it's going to be at a bar called Jose Pistolas in Philadelphia. It's a Howler Magazine and Total Soccer Show live show. I believe Brooks Peck from Dirty Tackle will also be there. And I'm going to try and persuade Brooks to run a best dirty tackle competition where people can sort of, come and slide tackle him on stage. Not sure he's going to go for it just yet. Maybe I'll have to buy him some shin guards. Maybe those Eden Hazard shin guards that Jose Mourinho talked about, front and back. Also, may get some higher profile guests than Taylor, myself, George and Brooks. Nothing 100% confirmed just yet, but that's what we're hoping to do. For updates about the live event, please go to FIFA.wtf/Philly 2018. That's all lowercase. I'll put a link in the show notes there as well. And from there, George Qureshi will update you via email on the exact location and time and details of the event. We hope to see you there. Okay, let's talk some Bundesliga. So on the line, I have Matt Hermann. Matt, hello. It's been a while. I think it was the start of the Bundesliga season was the last time we spoke to you.
Yes, indeed. I had a marathon session with both of you guys, and we'd get into all kinds of German pronunciation issues. It was a bit hairy.
Very many, very specific predictions is what I recall.
Yeah, most of which, who am I kidding? All of which I've completely forgotten by now, but you probably have them documented somewhere.
So if Taylor were here, he would want to revisit those predictions and see how we were doing. But he's not here today, so we don't have to do that. That's nice. The good news. We can maintain the illusion that we knew what we were doing all along.
I like that. I think that's an illusion I try to live by, basically.
I'm going to pat myself on the back. Literally, just did it. One of my predictions was that Hamburg would have to reset the relegation clock. And right now I see them sitting in, 17th?
Yep. And I think that prediction looks very, very good at the moment.
Yeah.
My preseason prediction for them was that they would make it into the relegation playoff spot, which is a place that they have a lot of experience with. But maybe I underestimated their badness.
Well, there's still the second half of the season to go, right? Because the reason we want to talk to you today, or I want to talk to you today, is to look back at the first half of the Bundesliga season, because the winter break is almost over, right? They come back this weekend, if my Google Calendar is correct. And the second half is about to start. Before we get into the sort of what happened and what we think will happen, I want to talk about the naming convention. I keep seeing the first half of the season referred to as the Hinrunde, and the second half as the Rückrunde. So first of all, is my pronunciation even close? And second of all, what do those words kind of literally translate as?
Well, your pronunciation seems pretty solid to me. The only thing that could be, perhaps improved is Rückrunde, which, you got to have that German R, you got to have the U umlaut. Actually, you don't have to have either of those things.
Is that the type of thing?
Totally close enough.
If I said that to a German, they would answer me in English, which is a thing that happened to me several times in Dresden a couple of years ago. I would try my best to order coffee, and they would say they'd just speak to me in English. Say, "Hey, what are you doing here?"
They love that. They love to do that. Sometimes you really got to put your foot down. No. I think that in both cases, your effort would really be respected. I mean, Rückrunde. I mean, Rück it basically just means like the back end.
Okay.
It's the back nine, the back round, as it were.
Runde is round. That makes sense. Okay.
Yep. Runde is round. And Hinrunde, I mean, in German you have, for example, like hin und her. That means like back and forth or going from side to side. I mean, hin is just the sort of the first half of the hin und her. So it's basically like the fore round and the aft round, if you want to talk in nautical terms or something like that. But it's quite simple.
I was asking because one day we thought maybe one day Major League Soccer could do something like this, and instead of like the Apertura Clausura Spanish language convention, maybe they could go with something else. German wouldn't make sense, but maybe the aft and fore could be what Major League Soccer goes with.
I dig it.
The aft season and the fore season.
And the weird thing in Germany is, I mean, I know that, Clausura and Apertura, these are real titles in quite a few Latin American countries, and they actually mean something. It can affect promotion relegation. It can affect playoffs if countries have playoffs. In Germany, it doesn't actually mean anything. Like if you win the Hinrunde, you don't get a prize or anything. Yeah. But oddly enough, the Germans want to sort of make it into a prize. So like there is a
with
sort
a trophy
of unofficial thing. No, not with a trophy, but like, newspapers and television stations will talk about a team winning the Herbstmeisterschaft, which means the autumn championship. It doesn't mean anything at all, but it's something that, like, when a team clinches being in first place going into the winter break, everyone wants to say, Bayern gewinnt die Herbstmeisterschaft wieder.
That's usually what they end up saying as well, Bayern being the first part of that.
That one's definitely on the clipboard. They can just paste that in.
Well, since we mentioned them, let's start with the team at the top of the table. Bayern Munich are 11 points clear, which is surprising because they fired Carlo Ancelotti, like not exactly at the start of the season, but a few games in. So theoretically, they had a bad start, had to replace him with Jupp Heynckes, I believe. So how is it possible for a team to have that bad a start and still be 11 points clear?
Oh, man. I mean, partly because this season has just been so insane. Borussia Dortmund started the season. It was, a historically great start to a season. Yeah. I think they went 5 or 6 games undefeated. I mean, they won all their first several games. They were unscored upon for the first several games. And they were, basically cruising into first place. I think they had on match day 6 or 7 a 9-point lead over Bayern, if I'm not mistaken. And after that, they went into an absolute funk.
So this is the Peter Bosz Dortmund, right?
Absolutely.
So
this is the Peter Bosz Dortmund.
So we were talking about Bayern, but the essence of this is that you're saying there's been no real challenger to first place that's had like a consistent season to take advantage of Bayern's early season stumble. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, oddly enough, the first half of the, Hinrunde was all Dortmund. And the second half of it was all Bayern. And it was sort of a really night and day thing. Only, the sort of exception I would say to that was that Bayern's bad patch, quote unquote, was not nearly as bad as Dortmund's bad patch.
So this is about a higher bar for Bayern, right?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, Jupp Heynckes came in and sort of reestablished some order in this team. A lot of sort of accusations and rumors flew surrounding Carlo Ancelotti after his exit from Bayern that basically he didn't give the players a lot of tactical instruction before some pretty important games. He didn't have very interesting or insightful training methods to offer. There were some famous pictures printed of his fitness trainer smoking as he was taking cones off the field. It was
the fitness trainer smoking.
Oh yeah, Ancelotti's fitness trainer. I forget his name, but he smokes, and he smoked like as he was taking cones off the pitch, finishing a training session. So, I mean, it was a real lackadaisical atmosphere.
So is this in comparison to the Pep Guardiola era, where, tactics are very, very tight and training is high intensity? Did he get accused of this because it wasn't at the same level as what Guardiola was doing? Or was it sort of below a level that would be expected of any Bundesliga team, or below a level that Bayern would historically expect, Guardiola or no Guardiola?
Yeah, I mean, I would just have to lean toward the latter on that.
Okay.
I mean, knowing that Bayern Munich have once employed Jurgen Klinsmann,
Right.
I think they've seen some chaotic training sessions before. If you
Philip
believe
Lahm would
Philip
agree,
Lahm.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. But yes, I think at most Bundesliga clubs, the standard of training that journalists who have spoken to some Bayern players about this issue would lead you to believe it was not up to scratch what was going on towards the end at Bayern. I mean, I'm sure that there was always a temptation for Ancelotti taking over for a coach that had established such a tactical backbone at a team like that with the quality of players that were there to take his foot off the gas, and he was probably encouraged to do that. But after a year and a half of that, it probably starts to the rot starts to set in.
It's like having a substitute teacher or a supply teacher for too long, right? And you all get a little bit too slack. And now the old headmaster, Jupp Heynckes, is back. Was there any noticeable difference on the field? Did Bayern take a different tactical approach or a player selection approach under Heynckes?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, basically, there was a lot of criticism that Bayern. This is a tricky line to walk because Bayern, prior to Guardiola's arrival under Louis van Gaal, which, in retrospect, a lot of people have a lot of good things to say about. But Bayern started to take on, under Van Gaal, a certain, and this is a weird reference to make because it doesn't really ring to a lot of Americans' ears, but it kind of does to someone who lives in Germany. Bayern started to resemble a handball team. And if you know anything about handball, there's this strange, it's almost like on a basketball court, there's a 3-point line. And basically all the defenders just sort of line up along this 3-point line. And the attacking team just sort of passes the ball around that line and just sort of takes a crack at some stage because they feel like they have a place to take a shot. And a lot of the attacking sets, as it were, that Bayern were undertaking under Ancelotti and previously under Van Gaal just reminded people of this kind of willy-nilly, like, we know that everyone's bunkering against us. We don't necessarily have a plan to sort of, pull defenses in any effective, shape-breaking way. We're just going to try and rely on the individual talent that we have and see what we can do. And that just doesn't really get a team by in the Bundesliga anymore. I mean, the Bundesliga has turned into a very sort of tactically sophisticated league, at least in a defending sense. Sometimes the offense can be a little bit high octane and
it seems to rely on the quick counters to me, right?
Yes,
it's all about
absolutely.
the defensive set, and then when you get the ball back, there's some expectation that the transition is really fast, and that's going to be enough to catch a lot of teams out.
Yep, and there's a lot of teams over the last several years who have sort of had a lot of success playing that way. I mean, the teams that made it into the Europa League and laid an egg, basically. Your Colognes, your Herthas, your Hoffenheims, they have in many ways lived off of a countering style, and in some ways that is a style that has left them looking a bit shorthanded this season.
Were you on your way towards saying that Jupp Heynckes has changed Bayern in that sense? Like, is not so much just sort of possessing the ball at the top of the box and eventually having a crack? Has he done something different, more direct?
Yeah, he has gotten Bayern to play much more directly. He has not turned Bayern into a countering team by any means, but they are a much more tactically flexible team than they were under Ancelotti. They seem to have, clear ideas of how they want to play. And it basically took hold almost immediately when he got there. I mean, Heynckes opened up with a string of wins. He turned them around in the Champions League as well. That's probably overstating things. I mean, basically the loss that precipitated Ancelotti's exit was their bad loss to PSG in Paris. And, looking at the return game in Munich, which, of course, the stakes were a bit different in that PSG knew that anything other than a bad loss would send them through in first. They probably didn't risk as much as they could have. But that was a completely different Bayern performance against, a very, very good team that we all knew took them apart just a couple of months earlier. And it was a good statement of how far Bayern had come in a pretty short time under Heinkes.
So just on Heinkes for a second, for listeners who don't know, he was the coach that won the treble, including the Champions League, the season before Guardiola came along, right? He kind of ruined Guardiola's early introduction, right? Because Heinkes had so much success. Then he retired, and then he seems to have come out of retirement to sort of rescue Bayern this season. Is there an expectation that he's going to sign a longer-term contract, or is he just in this to get them to the summer when they hire a new coach? And is that coach Julian Nagelsmann?
Yeah, that question has become a lot more muddy in recent months. I mean,
to me, it had the feeling of a rumor that was never, ever went beyond being a rumor. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one said anything or tipped their hand, and there's nothing seems to be in place to make it any more factual than the first day it was rumored, which is weird, right? Because normally things clarify over time.
Yeah, and speaking first to the Heinkes aspect of this, I mean, Heinkes goes way back with the Bayern brass, the Karl-Heinz Rummenigge and especially Uli Hoeneß faction there. I mean, in some cases, he either played against or alongside them. He's coached Bayern several times. Uli Hoeneß has been on record saying that his worst mistake as a sporting director at Bayern, which in most ways has been a rousing success, was not holding on to Jupp Heynckes as a coach for long enough in the 90s when he employed him for the first time. So obviously Heynckes thinks Hoeneß thinks a whole lot of Jupp Heynckes. And Uli Hoeneß, at one point in time after Heynckes had been back in the job for about a month or a month and a half, kind of was just joshing with a journalist and said, all we have to do is just, kind of convince Jupp to stick around. And these problems over who we'll find next as a coach are going to solve themselves. And Heynckes didn't seem to actually want to go along with that idea. I mean, he quickly said within a day or two that actually, no, I signed on for just the remainder of the season, and I don't intend to stick around. I just got
Netflix and Amazon. I'm ready to kick back.
Exactly. And I feel like
I've seen the first episode of Dark. That's what he's saying. I want to see the rest.
Nice. I think I've only watched 3 or 4 myself.
I haven't seen.
I've got a ways to go.
I haven't seen any of them, but we've been planning to watch it. I'm just imagining that Jupp Heynckes has seen the first one and is sort of like, all right, I'm in for this.
Nice. He is his position might be softening on that point. I feel like he might get intoxicated by success a little bit because Bayern really are in a very good position to, go after another treble potentially. I mean, the league is looking like it's in well in hand, 11-point cushion at the moment. With Schalke, their closest competitor, this is a team that people have a lot of hope for in the coming years because they're making a lot of good moves. But I don't think many people really expect them to challenge for the title this season. They already beat Dortmund in the German Cup. That was the last competitive game before the winter break. They have a pretty doable draw in the Champions League against Besiktas. So it's possible he might want to stick around, but I don't see it as all that likely. The problem is Julian Nagelsmann, who was the sort of putative choice to take over, is kind of faltering at Hoffenheim. I mean, I don't think that anyone thinks that the shine is off of him or anything, but Hoffenheim find themselves in 7th place. They did not put in a very good performance in the Europa League. And he is not quite the flavor of the month that he once was. I mean, Thomas Tuchel is starting to become maybe the front runner for this job. That would be problematic in that, a couple of Bayern players, especially Mats Hummels, have had experiences with him in the past and don't particularly like him.
Right.
But it looks to me that unless there is some serious movement in a couple of the other big name candidates that are real long shots, which is to say Jogi Löw and Jurgen Klopp, I mean, Tuchel is probably the best readily available option.
Okay, so enough Bayern talk, which I feel like maybe... I feel like the breakdown is maybe 50% of people want to hear about Bayern, 50% absolutely do not. So let's talk. I think we were talking Dortmund earlier about sort of their strong start to the season under Peter Bosz and then how that all fell apart. And now Sturger is there. So I think I know for myself that essentially Bosch seemed to, there was that defensive line was too high. I know that was a big story, and it all looked like it was falling apart. And it seems to me that Sturge has come in and sort of just played a more sensible brand of soccer. That's my perspective here in the United States. Is that the story in Germany?
Yes, absolutely. The word coming out of the Dortmund camp basically is that he is, giving them clear, simple instructions. And I think Sturge is smart enough as a coach, and he's done very good things as a coach on a very different level. I mean, he took Austria Wien, not a really big contender in the Austrian league necessarily, quite far there. He took Cologne, a sort of sleeping giant club, back into Europe after a very long time away. This is really the first time that he's had anything like the group of horses that he has at Dortmund. So I think he's probably just tickled to work with a squad this good. And I think he understands that if he just sort of gives them simple instructions and gets out of the way and trusts in some ways not only the sort of senior elements of the squad, because that was one of the problems, not only under Peter Bosch, but also under Thomas Tuchel. There was a certain skepticism among, players the likes of Nuri Sahin or Marcel Schmelzer, guys who had been at Dortmund a long time, who had won a lot of things at Dortmund, who kind of looked at the methods of some of these coaches and either for personality reasons or for tactical reasons thought, you know what, this guy's not up to it. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that we want to go along with this. And it seems to me that Peter Bosch is canny enough to understand that all he needs to do to get those guys on side. Oh, yes, of course. just a different Peter. It's the Peter principle. Peter Sturge understands that all he needs to do to get these guys on side is talk some sense. And thus far, it's worked out.
And it looks to me, so obviously as a US men's national team fan, this might suit Christian Pulisic better, I think. I've seen him play better and better as the Sturge era has gone on, because I like that it seems to me that Dortmund sit a lot deeper than they did under Bosch, right? I see the midfielders and everyone except Aubameyang essentially behind the halfway line when the other team has the ball, and they kind of pressure you when you come over the line, and then there's a lot more space to counter-attack into in that very sort of German way that we talked about at the top of the show, right? And I like the idea of Pulisic having space to run into instead of him getting the ball high up the field and then there's massed ranks of defenders for him to try and work his way through.
Yep, I totally agree, and I think that a lot of his best moments for Dortmund are the times when he did have that space, when he's sort of pushing the ball up the pitch, either with nice sort of diagonal balls to a sort of a wide runner. Yeah. Or in some cases when he is the wide runner, a lot of his best moments are the times when he can get into space and get into the box and cut back. That seems to be something that he's had a lot of success with.
I feel like we forget how quick he is, right? Because he didn't always get a chance to show it when Dortmund was sort of up on top of teams and doing that sort of pass it around the top of the box thing. And now you can really see him sort of accelerate. It's kind of I think there was a stat recently that he's actually lost the ball on the dribble more than anyone else in Europe, but he's up in the top 5 leagues. But he's also up there in terms of dribbles completed as well, which I think means that he's exciting to watch, essentially. Like, neither of those stats tells the full story, but they're both very interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's an exciting player that, Dortmund fans as well as US fans took to very, very fast. Yeah. Because he tries shit. He runs fast and he tries shit. And those kinds of players, when they have any degree of sort of completing their passes or sort of seeing their ideas through to the end, are automatically going to become fan favorites.
But he's also not one of those sort of tricky wingers who will, try stuff and then lose the ball regularly and then like shrug their shoulders or whatever, right? He's the guy that then hustles back and puts pressure on the ball.
Yeah, indeed.
What about, I guess since we've talked Dortmund already, it seems like maybe they could mount something resembling a title challenge, right? Going towards the end of the season, assuming that their form continues under Sturge. It's just a big mountain to climb, right? 11 points or no more because they're in third, right?
Yeah, they're in 13 points back.
13 points back. The team in second place, unless I'm wrong, is Schalke, which obviously has me very excited because Mr. Weston McKennie is playing, for now at least, in their central midfield. Hey guys, this is Daryl cutting in to tell you about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Woven, the t-shirt company. Woven, spelled Wohven, woven.com. Here's what you need to know about Woven. They are an independent company. This is a company that I reached out to because I saw their product, I saw their really interesting way of doing things, and I reached out because I wanted them to advertise with the Total Soccer Show. They said yes. But here are the two main reasons that I liked them to begin with and why I think you will too. It's the concept and the price. The concept is every month a graphic designer designs a t-shirt for Woven, just one time. They have rough guidelines which seem to be that they want the designs to be kind of elegant, simple, not too busy, kind of classy. It's really kind of right up my street. That's why when I first saw it, I thought, yes, I want that. And then there's the price. T-shirts can be, kind of expensive, but because of the way Woven do this, they do every month, each t-shirt is $15. That's for the graphic tee with a crew neck or a V-neck. You can also get a plain one for $11, but I kind of feel like the real value is in the t-shirt designed by a graphic designer, $15. If you go to woven.com, wohven.com, you can see a sampling of past designs, so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about when I try to describe these designs to you. And if you like what you see, you can get 25% off your first t-shirt with the discount code TSS2018. That's TSS 2018, TSS2018 at woven.com for 25% off your first t-shirt. The link will, of course, be in the show notes. Now back to Weston McKennie. Have you seen the story that I saw this morning about McKennie being moved to centre-back?
Yep. I saw that was actually doing the rounds in a couple of German publications the day before. Okay. And I thought that was really interesting.
We're a day behind on the Bundesliga news here in the US.
It takes some time to work it through the translating devices,
So what do you know about that? Has it happened or what's going on?
Well, the story is when Schalke took on Genk, which is not to be confused with Ghent, which apparently the Schalke official Twitter feed once when they announced the friendly originally tweeted out that they were going to face Ghent in a friendly and had to take it down and put it back up. So Genk. Tedesco decided to try something different, which is to say he wanted to put Weston McKennie in central defense, which doesn't necessarily seem like an immediately great idea, considering Weston McKennie is only about 5'9" or 5'10".
Yeah.
And for that reason, doesn't you don't immediately look at the guy and think, oh, he's a central defender. But Tedesco made a nice point in his quotes that basically he has a physical presence and that he can jump. He can run fast.
I've seen him win a lot of headers in the Schalke midfield.
Yeah, no doubt. He's also a bulky guy. Mm-hmm. Like compared to a lot of young central midfielders, he can body people off the ball pretty easily. And he's probably, as he ages and gets bigger, naturally as a person, is going to get stronger. And he has some pretty good guys to learn from. In that Naldo is he's getting up in years, but he is still being rated by a lot of people as one of the best central defenders in the Bundesliga, and is also somebody who scores a ton of goals out of central defense, either from open play or from set pieces,
especially after the 90th minute.
Yeah, exactly. It is a little easier when you're as tall as Naldo is, which Weston McKennie is not, but. I think this is just one of those cases that Tedesco likes Weston McKennie well enough as a player that he wants to be able to play him in as many places as he can. I mean, he mentioned it also as a cover issue in that, a guy like Naldo, as I said, getting up in years, sometimes he's going to get injured. But, Miljan Nastasic and Benjamin Stamboli are sort of the other first choice guys when they play a back three.
That's what I'm imagining is McKennie in the middle of a back three or somewhere in a back three, as opposed to, two centre-backs and he's one of them. That seems like that might be trouble for him.
Yep. Yeah, I doubt that he will probably be used in that configuration very much. But, McKennie has done really, really well to get as many games as he has. I mean, I think he's played 13 games in the league. Only like 4 for 90 minutes, but it's great that he's gotten even that much. I mean, it's
a lot of them
really
for like 60, 70 minutes, right? I've kind of tuned in. I have the Fox Soccer Match Pass, which means you can get every Bundesliga game over here on demand. So we manage for Total Soccer Show to always check in on what McKennie did that past weekend, and it's always impressive. Yeah. I mean, and the crazy thing is, whatever way you want to look at the configuration of the central midfield, there are options that Tedesco has, which you can argue are better than McKennie. I mean, Harit is probably a better dribbler than McKennie is. Max Meyer and Leon Goretzka are better two-way players than McKennie are, or at least more seasoned ones. Goretzka is a better scorer. Meyer is probably a little cannier tactically at the moment, but still McKennie gets games because Tedesco sees something in him that makes him want to keep giving him games. So I feel like this could go one of two ways. This could be that if he turns out to be sort of a defender, a centre-back that Tedesco can rely on, and a midfielder that he can rely on, this could go, he's always in the starting 11 because he's always in one of those spots, or it could become a thing where he's kind of like the third choice central midfielder in a 2-man central midfield and the fourth choice centre-back in a 3-man central defensive unit. And suddenly it could be one of those players where his utility or his versatility works to his disadvantage, right? Because you're there to plug all the gaps, but sometimes there's no gap, so therefore you're not needed. That is very much a risk. But the early returns, anyway, I don't indicate that to me. I mean, like I said, it seems to me that unless Tedesco suddenly falls out of love with Weston McKennie, I think he's just going to be one of those players that he finds a place for. And really, in that Leon Goretzka looks ever more likely to be leaving this summer. That's another one of those rumors that's just remained a rumor and has never clarified, but it's probably going to happen type things, right? Yeah, I think it's a real shame because I think Schalke are on the verge of becoming a real player in the Bundesliga. I mean, with this good young coach that they have and with a lot of players sort of coming into their own, I think that this could be a really interesting team to come. That was going to be my next question is, I mean, I know the history of Schalke, right? They haven't won the Bundesliga since, 1958, and they had that year in the 2000s where they thought they'd won it, but then Bayern scored a late winner somewhere, and Schalke was celebrating a Bundesliga they hadn't actually won. It's like, kind of tragic in a soccer, as much as soccer results can be tragic. And it really looks to me like this may be the best chance they've had in a good long while. And so I really wondered, is there a chance they sort of build on this year to be even better next year? Or even do they actually challenge Bayern in the second half of the season, in the Rückrunde? Oh, well done. No, I don't think that there's a great chance of that happening. I mean, Bayern, it's possible, I guess, if they really get themselves tied up in some serious Champions League battles and want to start resting players. It's possible it could happen because I do see Schalke winning plenty more games in the second half of the season, but it is really a lot of points to make up. I do think, however, in the season to come and the season after that there's no reason why Schalke can't become the sort of natural second or third place team for many years to come. Because I think, with the squad that they already have, losing Goretzka is going to hurt, but then again, Goretzka's been hurt a fair bit the first half of this season, and Schalke's played well without him. They signed a guy called Mark Uth. He's a striker who's been scoring quite a lot of goals over the last couple of years for Hoffenheim on a free transfer for the summer. They are sort of slowly putting together a really sensibly constructed squad, and they seem to have the coach who can take them on to better things. I want to pivot us to something maybe a bit bigger picture. Actually, I missed out on a good segue there. I want to pivot to video. How about that? Nice. Let's do it. I want to talk about the video assistant review or video assistant referee system that, if I understand correctly, debuted in the Bundesliga this season, but is slightly different to the video review that is being used elsewhere. So my two questions are: what actually is the system and how is it different to, say, the one we saw at the Confederations Cup? And how's it being received? How's it going so far? Well, I don't know enough about the one that was used at the Confederations Cup or the one that they're using in Italy, for example. I do know that the one in Germany
is not really all that highly thought of at the moment. Yeah, it seems like they had a plan of what to do hypothetically, but then once the season got started, it started to sort of just eat itself. I mean, the idea was basically the video assistant referee, which is located not on site in the stadium or in a truck outside, but located centrally in a television studio in Cologne.
That's the difference then. That's the twist that the Bundesliga went with. Yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, they wanted to keep the decision makers away from the game in order to not be influenced by the atmosphere of the game, which seems a bit arbitrary to me in some cases. But the idea originally was to only use it in either goal scoring situations, yellow red card situations, penalty situations, or situations in which the replay officials feel that the referee has made some sort of mistaken identity or something like that. And that's largely been the case. But there have been some really, really weird and troubling, sort of exceptional circumstances to that. Like there have been times where a goal will be disallowed because in a sort of a previous phase of play, an offensive foul was committed. Or there would be times where a goal, like a replay would be initiated, a replay situation would be initiated, in which most fans assumed that what was at issue was whether or not a penalty was going to be given for an attacking team. And then they come to find out that what the replay officials were actually looking at were a foul committed by another player on the attacking team in the build-up, and therefore it's not a penalty, and in fact it's a free kick to the other team going the other way. There's been other times where
it sounds like the idea of sort of not having the referees, the video referees there, has almost worked too well, and you're sort of so focused on weird, minute details that don't really matter, or everyone else is happy to overlook because they're not the core issue in the location where it's happening. They're sort of so divorced from that they're looking at these weird things that don't really need addressing.
Yeah, and the other thing that's troubled people, including me, has been that the original plan was to only overturn the decision on the pitch in situations where it was an obvious mistake, quote unquote, by the match official. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of instances where you've had very, very fine offside calls made by the replay officials. And this is a bit of a personal pet peeve of mine.
Did it happen to her?
No, it didn't. It's happened to just about every team at this point. But it's when players are judged to be offside because their arm is offside, or because one leg is offside, or because they were leaning their torso and part of their head was offside. These kind of sort of offside decisions where ultimately in real time the match official, you couldn't really blame them for making the decision in either direction. Mm-hmm. And yet the video assistant referee has chosen to overturn a call on the pitch because of these very fine gradations of slow motion partial body offside calls. And it seems like it's just sort of they wanted to sort of really corral the use of video assistant referee and also corral the overturning, and they found it very, very difficult to do both of those things, and it's kind of gotten out of control.
But it's going to keep going until the end of the season at least, right?
It is, and I feel in some ways that some of the directives they've gotten, I'm not sure whether they're directives from FIFA or from UEFA, but it would seem to me that a lot of people would prefer to see either no replay or a totally revamped replay, such as a challenge system. I mean, maybe not totally dissimilar to what we see in the NFL, where it's like, you have a certain number of challenges, and if you have a bad challenge, then you lose it. If you have a good challenge, then you get to keep it, or something like that.
I kind of like that idea. Then it would be part of I assume the coach's skill set. Like you'd be saying sort of, oh yeah, Nagelsmann's really good at challenges. Like he knows when to use them. Do you know what I mean? It would become part of the job, which I think would be interesting. And
you would have players on the field, sort of being conscious of not advising the coaching staff to take the challenge unless they really thought it was going to be a successful challenge. They'd have to use a bit of nous to understand when is the right time to do it.
I'm sure that'd be very annoying for referees. So there's that. I'm just thinking of referees listening right now will be like, no, let's not do that. All right, I also want to pivot to personal, if that's okay with you. As I mentioned earlier, I believe, unless I'm incorrect, you're a Hertha Berlin fan, right? I remember that from the John Brooks days. I look at them right now, they're sort of almost the definition of mid-table, right? They're in 10th, as much as you can be mid-table in an 18-team table. Can we say they're 9.5th? But I also know that, so I want to ask you, how have Hertha been doing? And also, I believe you made the move to Berlin full-time this year, right? Because you were splitting time back and forth with England previously.
Yep. I had been going back and forth between London and Berlin for many years, for work reasons, personal reasons, etc. And now things have gotten a little simpler. I am just in Berlin all the time, which is a really nice thing because, among other things, I get to see more of Hertha. Not that I didn't manage to see them quite a lot in the first half of the season. I even went to Bilbao to watch them in the Europa League, which was a total treat. Yeah. But I think they're actually doing pretty well. I mean, it helped a whole lot that the last two matches of the season against Hanover, or of the Hinrunde, as it were, against Hanover and Leipzig were, nice high quality wins, especially the one away to Leipzig, which I have to say shocked me. That really put a much better shine on the way that the season has gone. There have been many stages over the first half of the season where it looked like they had kind of stagnated a little bit, or maybe hadn't quite found what they were doing, because they had some pretty big problems, especially in the Europa League, with converting chances, as well as having sort of defensive blackouts, partly being, giving up a lot of penalties, just a lot of dumb mistakes, basically. And it seemed like a club that had the resources to go a lot further and sort of had some good, exciting young players. I mean, Davy Zelke, who came in from RB Leipzig and has started extremely well after not playing for the first 6 or 7 games. He came into the side and has made a really big impact.
Oh, I just had a flashback to his celebrations against Leipzig.
Yeah, exactly. He does the 3-fingered salute thing. Yeah. He's got he's a pretty sharp looking guy. So I can't blame him for going with this sort of quasi military salute thing for his celebration. But another guy who's very exciting is he's a 19-year-old midfielder called Arne Meyer, and it's kind of a thing for Hertha that they have one of the better youth academies in Germany, and like a lot of clubs, they have difficulties integrating their best youth players into the first team. I mean, they get one every couple of years. I mean, John Brooks is a great example of that. But they also lose a lot, either players, who sort of don't turn out, or players who don't, really experience success until they've left Hertha. So getting a player like Arne Meyer, who looks to be a very, very interesting sort of two-way midfielder, a box-to-box midfielder, if you will, has a lot of fans quite excited.
All right, I should add him to the scouting network.
Yeah, no doubt.
Definitely keep an eye on him. What about the John Brooks move to Wolfsburg? My take from afar is essentially his first half of the season was one of those too many injuries to make it work kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, John Brooks, he didn't make it back into the side until, match day 10. But he pretty much became a fixture in that team. I think he played 6 or 7 out of the last 8 games for them and looked largely very good. Do
you take any pleasure in the fact that he left Hertha for Wolfsburg and now Wolfsburg are below Hertha in the table?
No, because it's really something I kind of expect. Wolfsburg have not been up to scratch in the last couple of years, and as much as I was sad to see John Brooks go, I understood that he was going to go at some point, and I'm glad that he's gotten to make a move that probably earns him some money because Wolfsburg do spend a lot of money on wages. But he came back really in the nick of time for Wolfsburg. I mean, Wolfsburg had a very bad start to the season. They got rid of Andres Jonker. They brought in Martin Schmidt, and Martin Schmidt did nothing but draw for his first 6 or 7 games. But John Brooks was definitely a very big stabilizing force for Wolfsburg, and I think
so. Maybe some optimism for the second half of the season.
Oh, hugely. I think Wolfsburg, started off the season, as I said, very, very poorly, and the fact that they ended up, going into the winter break in 12th place was probably a lot higher than a lot of people expected, considering how badly they started, and having a stud in central defense like John Brooks, because he has played well, it's just going to lead everyone to sleep a little easier in Wolfsburg.
I got one more personal question. So obviously you, as I understand, you're from Northern Virginia, right? But you also, I don't know, do you have German citizenship, or have you spent so long in Germany that you're kind of feel very German? I'm essentially asking, for the World Cup, do you already have a team to support?
Oh boy, yeah. I'll support Germany for sure. I mean, I even at the last World Cup, I mean, the USA was always my sort of first priority when it came as a rooting interest. Yeah. But once the US were knocked out, I certainly wanted to see Germany go as far as they could, and I was very happy when they won the World Cup. I didn't take pleasure in it the way that Germans did or do, and I don't really see myself as like a German person, or I don't identify as a German. I mean, I have been here off and on for the last, 11 and a half years or something like that. So I have a lot invested in Germany. Yeah. I'm not a citizen.
About the same amount of time as me in the United States, right?
Yeah, no doubt. If they would let me remain a U.S. citizen after being naturalized as a German, I probably would have done it by now. But they're a little weird about it. So I don't think I'm going to do it.
But you do have a rooting interest for the World Cup, at least on a secondary team type level. So thinking about the national team, is there? I feel like there's a lot of talent, and that Confederations Cup performance and win kind of expanded the realistic World Cup ready player pool in my mind. So are there any names that people sort of should be aware of who are sort of their performance in the second half of the Bundesliga season could play them into the German World Cup squad?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Manuel Neuer has been out for several months as it is. He has sort of emphasized that he plans to be at the World Cup, and his recovery is not going off the rails or anything like that. Right. But until we see him play again and see him play well, I think that there might be another opening at goalkeeper for Germany. I mean, Marc-Andre ter Stegen will be the number one if Neuer isn't there. That's clear. But there could be another spot up for grabs. I mean, Kevin Trapp and Bernd Leno and Ron-Robert Zieler and a number of guys would feel like they would be in with a shout.
What about, say, Leon Goretzka in midfield? We were singing his praises earlier, but also he's had an injury-ish season, right, after a really great summer. Is he someone who, like, if fit, he's guaranteed a spot? Or is he someone who, if fit, is still going to have to compete, even for a spot in the 23?
No, I mean, if he's fit, he's in the squad. I'm ready to say that. Yeah. I think that he basically, between the sort of his play with the Confederations Cup squad, his play last season for Schalke, what we've seen of him this season at Schalke, and the sort of leadership that he showed. Yeah. I can't imagine that if he's healthy, he wouldn't be on the plane to Russia. Here's
a scouting network focused question. Kai Havertz is a guy we hear a lot about, and I'm always impressed when I see him for Leverkusen. He's only 18. How far is he from the actual German senior national team?
I don't think he's that far. I think that depending on how the second half of the season goes, and, at least for my money, Leverkusen is a team that I think could still make a move even further up the table, potentially.
Yeah, they're fourth right now,
the second half. Yeah, and I expect them to solidify their grip on a Champions League spot as the rest of the season goes on. I think between him and Julian Brandt and especially Kevin Volland, because let's face it, Germany are not blessed with a great wealth of out and out strikers, and Kevin Volland can be a striker or a sort of wing striker. I think that those guys have a decent chance. I mean, especially in the case of a guy like Kai Havertz. If Germany have any injury issues in midfield, if let's just say the likes of Marco Reus, he always seems to get injured before a big tournament. But if some of the other guys,
and just during the season.
Yeah, God Almighty, he's got the worst luck. Yeah. I mean, these are not necessarily like for like things, but I mean, Ilkay Gundogan has a terrible injury record. There could be unexpected spots opening up, and I think the Leverkusen guys could take advantage of that.
Oh, the final guy I want to ask about, because I'm aware we've had you on the phone now for nearly an hour, so I want to make sure to let you go soon. Weigl in midfield for Borussia Dortmund is someone I'm always really excited about when I see him. Is he someone who is making a push for the national team? Yeah, it's funny. He had a really bad time under Peter Bosz, in part because Peter Bosz kept wanting him to push higher up the pitch. Yeah. And in fact, there was a couple of games where they seemed to, apparently, visibly have a dispute over where he should be playing. And he's already, sort of commented that he now feels much more at home, sitting back a little bit further, where he feels like he has the game in front of him a little bit more. That makes sense.
I think Julian Weigl is a guy who is a bit on the bubble with the national team, only because I see, if you see him as a 6, I just think that there are other options which are a bit more seasoned, to be frank. I mean, I think that he may get he may get in the squad and he may not. I think it would be nice to see him go and sort of get a little bit more experience, but I don't think Joachim Löw is looking at him and thinking that he's a must to bring.
So I can't think of who you mean right now when you say the experience options. Are we talking like Khedira? Is he still involved in the national team?
Yeah. Okay. Khedira is a must. Khedira is, now that the likes of Philipp Lahm and Bastian Schweinsteiger are gone, I think Khedira is probably the most important player in this squad.
I see.
In the Germany squad, in terms of just from a sort of, personality team.
Yeah, like a seniority leadership type guy.
He's been around the longest, and he commands a lot of respect because he's won a lot of titles at a lot of different clubs.
So before we let you go, Matt, is there any sort of big Bundesliga-y thing that I haven't asked about that you think people should be paying attention to, especially say people in the United States?
Oh boy!
If the answer's no, the answer's no. I mean, maybe we covered everything. It's possible.
Nah, that's all right. That's all right. We can leave it at that. Let's just let the Bundesliga unfold.
All right, so for people who don't know, the Bundesliga is back, right, this weekend. I think it starts Friday, my schedule says. Bayer Leverkusen, Bayern Munich. That is absolutely a game worth watching. See how Kai Havertz does against that mighty Bayern team. And it's also Leipzig v Schalke on Saturday and Dortmund v Wolfsburg on Sunday. That's a reminder of how great the Bundesliga is and can be in terms of big teams, big names going up against each other and American players going up against each other. How about that for a Bundesliga sales pitch? It's not bad, right?
Bang, bang, bang. Listen to Talking Fussball, everybody.
Also, yes. So, yeah, Talking Fussball. Does it have a G or does it have an apostrophe so people can find it? I've become very aware recently. I was searching, or actually Taylor was searching for the Max and Herc podcast, the ESPN FC podcast. Mm-hmm. And I think he didn't use the ampersand and so couldn't find them. So it's really important to sort of search for podcasts with the correct spelling, right? So Talking Fussball or Talking Fussball?
Talking Fussball with a G. Yes, with a G. Normal spelling, normal usage here.
So thank you, Matt. I will make sure to put Talking Fussball in the show notes so people can find it easily. All that remains is to say thank you for taking the time to talk to me this afternoon for me, this evening for you.
Thank you. It's always a good time.